Hello, friends, and welcome to this golf program unlike any other. Oh, yes, my friends, those sweet words. This is Fairway Rollin, a golf program on the Ringer Podcast Network and on FanDuel TV. My birdie buddies, my par-saving pals, my eagle enthusiasts, what a time to be alive. It is major season officially. The first major of the season is staring us in the face. I can hear that music rolling down Magnolia Lane when it's major season time. Me and our PGA Tour accomplice, boots on the ground, Nathan Hubbard, have to go big. It is our guy, Justin Ray, a 3-ball here to deliver all of the storylines, players, deep cuts, make the cuts. Let's get those pegs in the ground and get going. J. Ray, how you doing, buddy?
How could I be anything but great? It's Masters
Week. It is Masters Week. It's time to jump up and down. Nate Dogg, let's get right into it. It is Rory and Scotty and Rory, and that's the story for this year. And if one of those two guys doesn't win, the betting markets will be pretty happy, I think. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. Nate Dogg, why wouldn't Rory or Scotty win this year's Masters?
Well, in Scotty's case, it is because he has not been playing his best golf, and he has strung, as J. Ray will tell us, he's strung a lot of good together, an occasional great in parts of the game, but he hadn't won a golf tournament yet, and that is very different than rolling in a year ago. And in particular, you know, Scotty, his last time out in Houston, he put those greens great, but the ball striking was not as exceptional as it's been leading up to Houston. You know, I think we might have said the putter was starting to revert to the mean from where it started to take off really a year ago around the Players or API. So for Scotty, I think that's what it comes down to. Is his game really in the shape that you'd want it to be? He has shown us a lot of frustration, and that tells me that coming off that hand injury, maybe off the extended period of rest, and also just freaking golf is hard. And it's hard to sustain that level of winning. It's not hard for Scotty to sustain excellence because he has still been excellent. But that level of winning, it just may be that his game isn't as sharp as it's ever been. Rory's game is as sharp as it's ever been. And from an all-around perspective, a lot of people, you know, J. Ray, again, will tell us statistically where that really lines up. But from an all-around perspective, the wins that he's had this year, in particular at the Players, where other parts of the game weren't perfect, but he did power his way through, both in using other parts of his game, but also in using his mind. And look, there were parts coming down the stretch at the Players where you felt like Rory was pooping it away once again. But the reason he would not win this tournament is the reason he has not won at St. Andrews. Last year at the U.S. Open, it's been between the ears. And so those are really the only two reasons I think that could get in the way from either of these guys winning.
Justin Ray, I sat down and tried to do it old school. I did my pros and my cons. I want to see how my pros and cons for each guy line up with what you're going to share with us. Let's go ahead and start with Scotty. He is defending. He's prepared to try and defend his title. We haven't had a repeat champion since Tiger in the early 2000s. But this is a second go around for him. He knows what it feels like to be a defending champion and what it feels like to come on in. I have some other pros here, but I want you to go ahead and give us a little bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, no, I'm right with Nate in terms of the kind of misgivings you might have about Scotty going into the week compared to last year or 3 years ago when he won. He's about half a stroke in terms of strokes gained total, gaining less than half a stroke. It's half a stroke less than he was last year going into this. He's around 15th on tour in greens and regulation, which is still excellent, but it's not first, which is where he's basically, parked and camped out for the last 3 seasons on tour. I like what you said about, the way he putted at Houston and his last start out. The thing that doesn't get talked about with Scotty a lot is that the secret sauce from around Augusta National, he strikes the ball great. He's putted above average. He leads the world in strokes gained around the green the last 3 years at this place. So there's an element of kind of underestimated balance to Scotty's greatness around this place that I think we need to fully take into account. I'm not too worried he hasn't broken through with a victory yet this season. I mean, you've seen flashes of the really good play in spurts in Houston and other places. It's really hard to win golf tournaments out here, especially when Rory McIlroy is playing the way he is. You look at Scotty's performance at the Masters since 2020, his debut. He's 32 under par, 11 shots better than anybody else. I'm still bullish on Scotty Scheffler this week. I mean, it's really hard to win the Masters back-to-back. Only 3 guys have ever done it, and this is the 89th Masters all time. But what Scotty's done to begin his Masters career is historic, winning 2 of your first 5 starts. The only guy to get there faster was Horton Smith, and he won 2 of the first 3 that were ever played, so it's hard to even compare the beginnings of those 2 careers at Augusta National. I'm bullish on him. I'm bullish on him this week. I think that, I mean, look, he's got to be even money for a top 10 finish, I would imagine, and I would lean on the side of yes, just based on what he's been able to do. You get to Rory, and I really love this number about Rory McIlroy. You talked about how other parts of his game are really, coming together, and it's not just the driver. He's still a brilliant driver of the golf ball, one of the best in the world, 2 or 3 best on the planet for my money. But you look at the percentage of his strokes gained total this season compared to last when it comes to off the tee. This season, he's getting about 37% of his strokes gained total with his driver. Last year, that number was 51%. 10 years ago, that number was over 60%. It was the most dominant club in his bag, and now you see what he's able to do around the green and on the green, and now he's getting more than 25% of his strokes gained with his putting. That's more than double what he had a year ago coming in here. I know between the ears, we talk about it, there's ways to quantify getting close over and over again. The last 10 years, Rory has 21 top 10 finishes in majors, just a ridiculous number, the most ever in a 10-year span for any men's player without a win. I think the second was Lloyd Mangrum a couple of times in the 40s and 50s. So, I mean, so close, so often. You mentioned it between the ears, but look, this is the first time that Rory's headed to the Masters with multiple wins on U.S. soil in a season, which I thought was pretty remarkable. He had never done that before. He's won in the Middle East and in the United States going to the Masters. The only time he's ever done it, twice on U.S. soil. You got to think that confidence is there. And, I mean, I don't know. Maybe does the burden get lesser as time goes on, or what is it? I mean, this is his 17th start at the Masters. I mean, the only one guy in the history of the tournament has won his first Masters title and starts 17 or later, and that was Sergio Garcia doing it in his 19th.
Yeah, it's really the narrative that's going to carry the whole year and season, I think, is can Rory come back from just the devastating loss last year at Pinehurst? House, it may be that the only thing that gets in the way of Scheffler is the meat. And by that, I mean, we're serving Texas-style chili. We're serving Papa Chef's meatballs. You and I are headed down there tomorrow. We're talking about packing in our own dry-aged ribeye if Mr. Chang will let us. So I don't. It may just be the food poisoning that gets in the way of Scheffler, but Rory, it's going to be between the ears, don't you think?
Yes, for sure. Now, look, I do want to ask this because the weather report is interesting. It's going to be cool all week. The only day that's in the 70s is Thursday. It's going to be a spectacular day, like a prime Masters. Everybody's going to turn on their TV Thursday evening. It's going to be showing out the clay. There will be no clouds in the sky. It's just going to be magnificent. But the rest of the week, the highs are all under 70. And the only day it looks like there's any precipitation possible is the first part of Friday morning, and the wind is negligible. I mean, there's only one day with wind forecasted at 10 miles an hour. So I think what Immelman reported in terms of this firm and fast condition could be the prevailing dynamic for this golf course. And what I want to know as we sort of get into this, and especially let's layer it on with Scotty and Rory, I think it's going to be firm and fast. And I think it will be as firm and fast as the great green jacket decision makers down there decide to make it. JR, does that sort of how's that factor into the handicap?
A little bit. I've learned since the inception of the Augusta National Women's Amateur to not take a whole lot from what I see, but like human nature is, wow, they're really getting close to a lot of these pins watching the hottest players that week in that event. Fire at flags and take advantage of a lot of opportunities. I don't know how much it impacts how I would forecast who's going to be successful. It may. What I would say is, I've told you this before to you guys, it won't let me add names to the list, but maybe one or two I'll cross off. the weather is like that, as you say.
Fair enough. And we don't think it matters to Rory or Scotty, right?
No,
Yeah.
not at the top of the game. No, not necessarily. I don't think it's a big impact.
Yeah. Well, Nate Dogg, let's take a quick break, and then let's come back and start going down this card. We have to come up with some names. If it's not going to be Rory or Scotty, who can possibly win this golf tournament? When we come back, we will cover that. All right, we're back. We put the question to JR. If it's not going to be Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy, let's talk about some names of guys that have been in some form, could make a run at it. It will be names of guys that have not won this golf tournament. But let's start slicing and dicing a little bit here, JR.
I mean, JR, you have to start with one, though. I know, before you go, I got to put your laser on it. You got to start with Morikawa, don't you? Because when you look at him statistically across his entire year, this is the guy who's playing the best golf right now, isn't he? And again, as we talk about Rory and Scotty from a mental perspective being not necessary, or at least that being the question mark, he had a couple tough Sundays that have really rocked him, but statistically, prove it out, brother. This is the best playing golfer in the world at the moment, I think.
And I'll do even one better. In his Masters career, every year he's gotten better putting these greens. His strokes gained putting per round has gone up literally every single time he's played. He was so close last year. I think people forget how well he played in the major championships. Rounds 1, 2, and 3 in the majors last year, he averaged more than 3 strokes gained per round, which is, I'm going to win the golf tournament good. Final round, he lost about a third of a stroke. He just didn't get to the finish line. A guy with the skill set, the iron play, the resume that Colin Morikawa has, that doesn't strike me as a problem that's going to persist year after year when he gets to these championships, not being able to get across the finish line. You look at his ranks, they have it updated after the Valero Texas Open was just finished as we tape here, but he leads the PGA Tour in birdie average, strokes gain approach, strokes gain tee to green. Like, you go through all those different numbers, you talk about how he's putting better and better on this golf course as he's gained more experience. I'm with you. It's really tough to not like Colin Morikawa, who has the best scoring average in the history of the Masters among players who have not yet won.
I mean, that 2 over last year, he made a mistake on 11 that really cost him, but he was very much in that tournament down the stretch. It felt like him, Oberg, Max was fading a little bit. You could just see coming down the stretch there with Scotty, but he was very much in that tournament to win. House, can you just tell me the truth? Like, of all of the golfers that we cover, you go back and forth the most on Morikawa because I think he's probably lost you the most money of any golfer because
full disclosure.
Yeah, other than perhaps my brother, but the reality of him is there are moments where we think he's prime and he shows up a week or two late. But he's never really not shown up. I mean, we got a 2-time major winner. This is a guy who has shown that he can be a dog, but I don't always believe that you believe he's a dog.
Well, it's not just me. The numbers tell the tale. And I will say this about my investments in Mr. Morikawa. I was very bullish on him a couple years ago, top 10. And also, I think we had a nice top 5 finish for him as well here on the Fairway Rollin program. And I'll just say it right now, 2025, a big play for at least House the starter on Colin Morikawa top 10. I'm going to definitely play that. It is going to be a sizable investment in this. He is prime for all the reasons. Here's the issue. This man is not finishing golf tournaments. He is 29th in final round scoring. Now, why is that? What's going on in these final rounds in 2025?
29th isn't that bad. There's 190 guys in the ranking. I know it's not the same, but I get what you're saying.
And if you look at the guys that are ahead of him, it's a bunch of names that we're going to talk about here that he's competing with. It's not a knock. It's the only sort of element that's missing. And it's, that Sunday dog. It's what Nathan just asked about. So I think he has it. I think last year being in the final group in 2 different majors, like those are reps. And we've seen this, Rick Gaiman did a nice job earlier this season, this very fun thought exercise where he took player A and player B and said, which of these two guys is, more likely to win a major sooner. And it was Colin Morikawa compared to himself. It was the run that he had when he won his two majors compared to the run that he's been on over this past year. I mean, he is green light go in so many of the advanced metrics, the categories that matter at Augusta National. And your fine point about his putting, you got to have some Morikawa in your portfolio, JR.
For sure. Now, the one stat that I got asked about multiple times as I was being, probed by friends and colleagues about who I like this week, I had this brought up twice by two different people. Morikawa's 2 major championship wins, not in front of full crowds. 2020 PGA Championship, 2021 limited fans at the Open Championship. I brushed it off as nonsense originally, but then I thought about it. I was like, we won that tournament at concession, and there weren't a lot of people there, and remember the duel with JT at Muirfield, and there's no one there.
No one there.
But you know what? After, watching him, he's been in enough big environments, Ryder Cups, President's Cups, the bright lights of the SoFi Center in West Palm Beach. Yeah, and I say that half serious, but I don't invest a ton in it, but it was kind of made me think a little bit that maybe there is a little bit of that factor. I tend to lean more, obviously, on the empirical stuff. I will say, though, that if he can just get a little bit better on the par fours at Augusta National, he's going to have, he's going to definitely be in contention. In his career, he's 36 under par on par threes and fives at Augusta, and he's 23 over on par fours. Obviously, the threes are usually the hardest there. The fours, you're not going to play them under par typically, but if he just cuts that down to about even par, 1 over for the week, he's able to take advantage of those par threes, and of course the par fives where you've got to score to have success.
Well, let's keep going down the board. I mean, it sounded coming into today that you don't really learn anything from the last weekend of the Masters other than who to stay the heck away from. And Tommy Fleetwood took a big old poop today in San Antonio that would be a little bit concerning. Although listen, that the cut at that tournament was 2 under, so it played very difficult on the weekend. But really, it was this live tournament at Doral where it felt like maybe we were going to have a Phil, Bryson, Rahm, mano down the stretch. And Mark Leishman won this golf tournament. All 3 of those guys shot over par and kind of threw their feces Tommy Fleetwood style around the Trump course. So I guess my ask of you is, did you learn anything from this weekend? But really more acutely, can you break down the live guys at this point? We've gotten to see them a little bit more. And I certainly think that the story of 24 was Bryson DeChambeau. I just will never forget the halo around that guy, first at Valhalla, but then really when he walked into the course at Pinehurst, everybody was paying attention to him, both players and fans. He was the guy, and he brought a lot of energy back. This has just not always been his place. As you said, last year we thought maybe he got over the hurdle, but can you assess these live guys in this moment? And as we think about the betting markets, how you would assess them relative to some of the guys on the PGA Tour who we've seen a bit more from this year?
I'll start by saying that the examination at Doral is very different than the one at Augusta National. Doral, call it the Blue Monster, but missing fairways is really penalizing. Both can yield some high scores, but you get more out of great driving the ball at Doral than you will at Augusta National, where you can be wild and have success. They're among the easiest fairways to hit on the PGA Tour anyway, year in, year out. So it's a very different examination. And on a course where there's a lot of volatility, like Doral always has. You can remember tons of different examples of when it was a PGA Tour staple of, wild finishes and big comebacks and stuff like that. It's tougher to glean from that because there's just more elements of randomness that can impact it. So, yeah, we looked at the beginning of the day and, Bryson had the lead there. Sergio's been playing some pretty good golf and, he looked good up and he was really Leishman's biggest, contender until the end there. The other names too, Phil, look, he's shown flashes here so far. He was in second place at one point on the live leaderboard. I don't take a ton out of that. Like you said, the last week of the year, you don't get a lot out of it other than maybe, all right, this guy's put another chunk of evidence that I shouldn't back him next week at the Masters. But, obviously Bryson's front of mind when it comes to the live guys. What he did in the opening round last year, I really thought he had maybe turned a corner on the greens. I think he gained like 3.5 strokes putting, which was just ridiculously above his career high. Kind of regressed to the mean as the week progressed, but he led the field in strokes gained ball striking for the week. It was really just, he just didn't putt very well rounds 2, 3, and 4 and got passed by a lot of guys. His career at the Masters, he had 18 double bogeys or worse in his first, I guess it was 6 or 7 appearances at the Masters, 2016 to 2023. Only one last year. So the big mistake that kind of had plagued him at Augusta National over the beginning of his career kind of took that away with some of his decision making. So that's a little encouraging for me. The guy who was so prevalent, top of mind all the time, we always talked about, and then we don't now, is Jon Rahm, obviously.
It's just wild.
He had a limited kind of impact on the major season. I think it was the U.S. Open. He had the foot issue, and
yes, he missed it.
He wasn't a factor there, and he's one of the best young U.S. Open careers that we've seen in a generation. But he's the guy that you look at some of the different live stats and you try to gain some kind of perspective on how they've been playing. You can do it with your eyeballs as too, watching it and be able to see a little bit more. But he leads that tour in birdies. He's on top in all kinds of different statistics. But how does that test translate to what he can do at Augusta National? But yeah, no, you go top of mind with Bryson and then Jon Rahm. And then, look, a guy who I thought was interesting, and I'm encouraged by his strong play this week in Miami. I know, take with a grain of salt because of what I said, the differences in the golf courses. Sergio Garcia's been playing some good golf. And
he has.
I think you can probably find some value there because there's not going to be there's still not the amount of eyeballs watching that tour.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think you can find some value there with Sergio, a guy who
really wants to be on that Ryder Cup team, and this is how he's going to have to earn it and show it.
Yep, 100%. So that was the guy I would lean to, other than the big two names in Bryson and John.
And interestingly enough, the number one ranked player in the world, at least according to Phil Mickelson, Joaquin Niemann, didn't make your cards. But I do want to go ahead before we're done poking fun at Phil and get into a little bit more of Jon Rahm, because I do think it is worth emphasizing how bad his 2024 was and how out of sorts he was. Now, some of it had to do with the injury to his foot, where he had to withdraw from the U.S. Open right before it started. But his major season was a catastrophe. He finished tied for 45th at the Masters. He missed the cut at Valhalla. He had to skip the U.S. Open, and then he reminded us of who he is with the T7 at Troon at the Open Championship. But the big open question with him is, how is he reacting to the outside world's reaction to him jumping over to the live? It does seem, based on just the performances, all he does is collect top 6 finishes on the live tour. And, this is part of the thing that is really, I'm looking at the guys that finished in the top 9 at Doral. It's Charles Schwartzel, Masters winner. Sergio Garcia, Masters winner. Phil Mickelson, Masters winner. Bryson, who's acquitted himself well here last year. Cam Smith, who has a great record at the Masters. Jon Rahm, Masters winner, and Patrick Reed, Masters winner. That is a list of guys that, look, man, one of the things we're going to be doing this week on the FanDuel Sportsbook is putting together some fun make the cut parlays. I mean, 5 for live. I'm going to at least get 5 of these dudes pulled together. But I'm asking you a question about Jon Rahm that you can't answer.
Good.
Because it's a question about the psychology. Where do we think that man's head is at? The game, I watched quite a bit of the round at Doral, and he was firing. He came out hot. Of course, they're playing the holes out of order, so you have no idea. At least I don't. I can't keep track of it. But he came out with several birdies, pushed himself all the way up to second or third on the leaderboard, and then some of the stuff fell off. But he was on the FanDuel Sportsbook in the 21 to 1 range. He is right now 14 to 1 because of what happened at Doral. So he moved. He's the third ranked player ahead of Colin Morikawa to win the Masters coming in right now, JR.
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with him being over Colin, as you know from how much I sung his praises. But it's not a knock on John. First of all, he's going to obliterate the par fives at Augusta. He always has. Since his debut in 2017, he's 59 under par on the par fives, second best of any player to Tony Finau in that span. I can't answer your psychological question. I don't have it built into my models or my spreadsheets, unfortunately. But this is a guy that, whether it was physical or something else, mental, whatever, it was psychological, whatever, he averaged less than 3 birdies per round in the majors last year. That's not that. I mean, Jon Rahm can roll out of a coma and do that. So I think that, I'm buy low. It's going to get better for John, especially as, if he's got a full clean bill of health, his foot's fine, and we have no reason to believe it's not. That's obviously very encouraging. And we've seen what he's capable of, around these parts. When he came back, chased down Brooks Koepka, and, he's also got a U.S. Open in the bag too. So, I'm stating the obvious that he's an extremely talented guy, but I just say from a psychological perspective, I veer towards it's gonna improve, and I trust what I've seen in his career so far more so than the alternative.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 points that I have in my head that have me thinking about Jon Rahm, and I want to get excited about him. 2 of his 3 rounds this week were over par, so I know Dural's hard, but it just. It didn't feel like he closed this one great, but maybe he's thinking towards Augusta. I watched him watch Xander finish that record-tying round at Augusta, or at Valhalla, excuse me. I watched him sit there and watch the TV, and he turned to the people at his table and said, he's going to be the second man to do this. And I think it actually was, maybe he was the third, J-Ray, you'll tell us, to shoot that number in a major. Now, Valhalla was playing easy, but the point of that story is I walked out of there and I said, this guy is a student of the game. He understands the history. He gives a shit about it. And I think physically, he was not able to do what he wanted to do last year. The second point is, I haven't watched the Live doc that's coming out, but in the screener, there's that sort of almost comical moment where he says very passionately, don't tell me I don't care about golf and I don't care about, right? And so it's time for Jon Rahm to re-inject himself into the historical part of the game that he seems to care a lot about. And by the end of last year, he was receiving accolades on that Live tour, and he was pretty emotional about it. It'd been a hard year for him, but he was still, at the end of the year, one of their best players and performed extremely well, right? So I expected him coming into this year to be that sort of silent assassin that maybe we wouldn't see him much because he was playing abroad. And by the time he showed up to Augusta, people were sort of sleeping on him. And that history lesson that he got last year, watching other guys succeed as he drifted away, was going to really energize him into playing well. I just didn't see what I wanted to see out of him this weekend to make me excited. But I think this is a sneaky gut check tournament for Jon Rahm this year. If he's going to be in that discussion on a go forward basis, and I think he cares about what people say, I think he wants to prove people wrong. It's time for him.
Yeah, you mentioned Garcia being inspired by being a Ryder Cup year. I don't think there's any chance in hell they leave Jon Rahm off the European Ryder Cup team.
No chance.
But that's another element that can get a guy, like him at his stature, energized, focused. I'll say from a statistical standpoint, he is one of the best players in the world on those on the front side the first 9 at Augusta National. You can't call it the front 9. The first 9 at Augusta National, 30 under par in his career, just 3 under par on the second 9, which is hard to believe given all the different scoring opportunities that are present there. So I love looking at little pockets of holes where guys have really succeeded or really not succeeded. Like Bryson DeChambeau in his career is terrible on holes 4, 5, and 6. Just like one of the worst players since he made his debut on those holes. I love looking at those shots at Augusta National. What's the collection of shots that these guys really succeed at or really have trouble with? You would think Jon Rahm, second 9, those par 5s at Augusta, he's just going to rip him to pieces. He's got to be great on it. For some reason, he's been much better on the first 9 than the second 9.
Well, let's take a break and then let's come back and talk about some these names that I do want to sink my teeth into, because we're doing the pros and cons here. We're looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook, the odds. We're trying to come up with some value, and there are some names that still are jumping off the page at me, JR. Let's take a quick break. Come right back with some of those hot players. Okay, we're back. Justin Ray, let's get into some of these names that have yet to be mentioned. There are some guys that have been playing pretty good golf on tour. There's some major winners, guys that are due for a good performance at the Masters. Let's start with Justin Thomas.
Yeah, so this was a guy, I think, it might have been 4 straight years I picked him to win the Masters because he was trending upward every single year. I'm like, the iron play is among the best in the world. He's getting closer. We're climbing the ladder, and then he misses the cut the last 2 years. So that trend kind of reversed. His strokes gained totally, losing more than 1.2 strokes per round. It's just not himself. Scoring average nearly 75 his last 4 rounds at the Masters. Throughout his career, tee to green's not been the problem around Augusta National, gaining well over a stroke per round with his full swings, but putting has been the issue. When he's had low rounds, he's basically been neutral putting in terms of strokes gained. And then when he struggled, he's really struggled. So that's the one thing I look at coming to Augusta National. Like as you gain more experience, I mentioned the Morikawa number earlier. I trust that guys are going to improve, but he's really struggled on the greens the last couple of years. And I'm a little tentative there. As great as he's been this year, you remember the unbelievable, was it the 3rd round at the Players when he went super low? Got that in the bag, obviously. Friday. Any given round, you feel like you can go out and shoot 64, 63. He's gone super low more than anybody in the game over the last 10 years or so. But that putting number with him at Augusta National, that kind of leads me to lean away this week.
He's gaining shots, putting at least, and the approach play obviously has gotten a ton better. I mean, he's 3rd inside 100 yards. He's 2nd from 125 to 150. So
he's hitting it like Justin Thomas again. Yeah,
he really is doing that, and it does feel like the putting has gotten better. But I do agree with you. It's felt a little bit like he's had trouble stitching those rounds together. So, a guy who hasn't had trouble stitching rounds together and who sort of quietly coming into this year has won more majors than Scottie Scheffler last year, and that's Xander Schauffele. And we haven't been talking about him as much because he's been injured. And House and I, when we have talked about him, it's really been, do we trust him yet coming off this injury? Is it time to get back in on Xander, who learned how to hunt last year? Full stop. We could have said, Valhalla, wasn't a real major. Yeah, there was a real board, but the course wasn't. Well, then he went out and won the British. So he's there. He knows how to win. Do you trust him? For us, it's really been, do we wait until Quail Hollow, or has he had enough reps? And it felt the last few times that we've seen him like the flashes were there. But you tell us, Jay Ray, how do you feel about Xander in this moment?
I'll say first that, when it's against the glow of what Scheffler also did last year, I think that last season, what Xander Schauffele did in the majors is really underappreciated. This is a guy that, if Scotty is fairy dust and doesn't exist, I mean, we're singing massive praises for a guy who wins 2 majors, top 8 in the other 2, only the 4th guy to do that in like the last 45 years, to go win and top 8 in the other 2 majors. Jordan Spieth in 2015 and Tiger twice. Those are the only other guys to do it. I don't necessarily trust the Xander Schauffele right now. This is not the same guy that headed to the Open Championship. The intercostal strain has really done a number on not only his golf swing, but his putting. He's lost strokes putting in all of his starts so far this year, which is very non-Schauffele-like.
Feels like rust, doesn't it?
It does. It does feel like rust. I feel like I watched him play more rounds in TGL than I have on the PGA Tour so far this year, just simply because of the timing and the way it's worked out. And, he's talked about how brutal it was to miss his hometown event twice in a year, because they played Genesis at San Diego as well as Farmers. He's got to be hurting to not play in that. It had to be a pretty significant injury for him to miss that opportunity twice in the same season. I just haven't seen enough this year to trust that he's going to be healthy and fit enough to be his best self. But give it a few more weeks, few more months, and he's an excellent course fit at the PGA Championship. That's for sure.
House, where do you end up on Xander?
just wait. I mean, I need him to be better around the green, and J Ray just shared the stats on the putting thus far. He's going to be fine. I really do think, you can buy right now little down payment on guys in the upcoming majors. Honestly, I don't mean this in any way other than as a rational economic actor. I hope he misses the cut at the Masters so I can buy him at a great price for the PGA Championship.
Yeah.
Not kidding.
I just don't think you're going to get it. That 66
Probably
at Valspar on Sunday was tasty. And that's the only reason I think his numbers are where he is, because otherwise I think most people would fall on that side of it. It's just if you believe in that kid, that 66 showed you that maybe now he's ready to come do it.
What a difference it is. If he opens with 66 instead of closing with 66,
we're all
the
over
perspective is totally different. Shots are worth the same regardless of round, but your perspective and your feel for it is definitely different when it's the last thing you saw from a guy.
Well, speaking of guys who have, started strong and not finished strong, let's talk about Ludwig Åberg. And you said it right before we came on here, which is that he hasn't been the same since which moment? Tell us. Since
he got super sick out on the West Coast. It just hasn't been
since he was barfing on
absolute
course.
World crusher, and was the win we saw at Torrey Pines, and the other great rounds he had put together leading into that. He just hasn't been the same. And I wonder about your second time around Augusta National for a guy who led the field in strokes gained putting the first time he ever played there. I don't know if we're looking at a Spieth Crenshaw situation where he got some kind of knowledge where we're like, this is institutional. This guy knows the tricks around these greens, or he just had an unbelievable week putting. I tend to lean towards the latter simply because it's more likely, in terms of just probability speaking. I looked at guys who had a really good finish in their debut in the kind of recent years. So since 2010. So Jason Day in 2011, Jordan Spieth in 2014, those 6 or 7 guys, the only guys who really played well the following year. Spieth, obviously, when he came back and won, and his start to his Masters career is the best in the history of the tournament in terms of 3, 4, 5-year starts. And then Will Zalatoris, who in 2021 finished second, came back and finished tied for 6th. It's tough to follow it up with another great result. And I am wary of how he's played and how he's looked since coming back from being, super sick on the West Coast, and he just hasn't looked like himself.
Yeah, I mean, look, he shot a 69 on Sunday last year. I mean, but for 11,
it's very good.
And I think he's right there. And I think I can't wait to see how he processes the information, having learned that course. And he moves up learning curves at golf courses faster than almost anybody that we've seen. And that's as much as his swing. That's the golf robot part of Ludwig. So I can't wait. He's going to play away from that water on the left on 11. He will hit the runoff area on the right before he goes in the water this year. But there is something about him in this moment that feels hard to trust, House.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to go ahead and get just a top 20 down so I have some Ludwig in my portfolio. I want some exposure to the man because of the talent, but he doesn't feel trustworthy yet. And I honestly have him in the same position in my mind as Hideki Matsuyama, who I really would like to make an investment in. The price is wonderful. He's north of 30-1 to win this year's Masters, but he doesn't have a top 10 finish other than the win. And I kept waiting for him to just show up and kick some ass at Torrey, just a place where, he had two tries at it. And both him and Ludwig missed the cut this past weekend. When you go through the profile of winners, Masters winners, there isn't a long list of guys who missed the cut in the tournament that they played coming into the Masters. It's not a great list to be on. Having said all of that, I do want some exposure to Hideki the same way I want some exposure to Ludwig. Help us, what's the glass half full case for Hideki, JR?
I want to go, before we leave Ludwig, I want to point out one more thing, and I'm sorry to
please
put a fire hose on the flame. Averaging narrowly losing strokes to the field per round with his approach play. this is the most important major when it comes to approach play from an analytical standpoint. 7 of the last 10 champions have been in the top 6. I can go on and on about the iron play. It just hasn't been the same, not quite himself, since the West Coast when he got sick. When it comes to Hideki, well, I still think people underrate how good his short game is. Led the PGA Tour in scrambling last season, among the leaders again this year. Nobody's scrambled better at Augusta National since 2020 than Hideki Matsuyama. I think the first thing you think of is either the pause and the downswing or great approach play with Hideki Matsuyama. You don't necessarily think of his hands, of his short game, but that's something he's got in spades, and it's really benefited him throughout his career at the Masters. I do think there's something to now look. I'm not saying that the Century Tournament of Champions is anything like the Masters in terms of overall test, tournament prestige, all that. I will say though, there are a lot of changing elevation lies there. And I know that you present yourself a lot more scoring opportunities, but what he was able to do in pretty docile, windless conditions out in Maui, breaking the source scoring record, it just is a slice of what he can do better than everybody else when it comes to those lies, those uneven lies, with balls above your feet, below your feet. It doesn't impact him, and it hasn't impacted him his career in Augusta National. I am a little bit wary, though, like you said, no top 10 finishes on the PGA Tour since that win, and it's such an outlier of a golf tournament in Hawaii to begin the year. It's tough to glean anything really from that. I'm kind of leaning away from Hideki and Ludwig, but I could see a window to be lured back in for sure.
House, there's an interesting Ludwig Hideki missed the cut bet out there just to try for it. I don't think it happens, but
Hideki has 10 straight made cuts, and he's third on tour in strokes.
When you count the ones he didn't miss, I think it's like 19 made major cuts in a row when he's teed it up.
If you're spraying and praying, there's a little bit of those games are not as good as they are as they've been right now. That's for sure. So, but Jay Ray, I want to ask you a question. There's not a lot to take away from this week. Again, it's who's playing well, who's not playing well. But one of the things that has become a pattern on the tour over the course of the last year is there's been a lot of guys who are winning golf tournaments that we don't expect. Now, that doesn't tend to happen at this tournament, but it's happened before with Schwartzel. It's happened before with Danny Willett, and usually it takes a guy to fall over as opposed to, when Jordan Spieth fell over and Danny Willett won a golf tournament. It's been a little while since we've had one of those guys who's going to show up to the Champions Dinner and everybody's going to be like, oh, right, this guy won a Masters. It just with the growth in talent and the democratization of really great golf out there, it feels more possible than ever. And if I have one takeaway coming out of this week, it's that Mav McNeely's now a top 10 player in the world. Now, that's not me saying go bet Mav McNeely, but are there some Mav McNeelys, some Akshays out there? Are there some guys who we would say, wow, here's his first major, he won it at Augusta, a little bit further down the board that we ought to potentially be paying attention to this week? Or do you really think we're focused, just like the Final Four, on the number one seeds? Don't mess around with the rest of your card. Go chalk.
I'll say your two Masters examples, Schwartzel in 2011, I think 11 different guys held a share of the lead on that Sunday. It was one of the craziest final rounds. First Masters I was ever at in person working. And he birdied the last three to jump ahead and get the win. And Danny Willett, people forget, when he won the Masters, he was 12th in the world. He had won Dubai earlier that year. He's a little more accomplished. European Tour, obviously, when not on U.S. soil, and he hasn't won here since, and he's fought injuries and stuff. So I get your point, though. We haven't had a big surprise winner. I know the world ranking now at this point in the split tour era doesn't mean what it used to mean, but the only winner we've had outside the top 50 in the world ranking in like the last 45 majors is Phil when he won at the PGA, and that's not exactly an out of nowhere type guy. It's an all-time great. So look, it's tougher here, statistically speaking, because the field's smaller. I think you're more likely to see, Thurston Lawrence contending at the Open Championship last year, and you're like,
right.
I mean, I follow this game as close as anybody, and I had to read up on him. So there's more likely you're going to see it in the super lowercase d democratization type setup at the U.S. Open, at the Open Championship,
blocky at the
somebody
PGA.
lower at the PGA too. What's that?
You said blocky at the PGA.
Blocky, yeah, of course. Who could forget? But so it's less likely at the Masters.
So having said all that, let's take a break and then come back and let's talk about some sleepers, because we're not going to go through a whole. Now these are sleepers that we might just try and make some money on, but let's go ahead and take a quick break here and then come back. All right, let's go down this card. Let's try and find some value. Let's build out some nice finishing positions, maybe a couple parlays. There'll be some names we want to pair up together, guys that play similarly. What are you looking at in terms of some names we haven't mentioned thus far, Justin Ray?
Well, briefly mentioned by Mr. Hubbard a moment ago was Mr. Akshay Bhatia, who obviously was a big part of the Players' Championship this year. We have a record 8 lefties in the Masters this year, including Akshay. I like him. I like that element of the shot shaping that lefties are able to generate around Augusta National. Him and another interesting guy who's now a Ryder Cup veteran, had one of the most impressive and memorable wins of the entire year last year at the Scottish Open. Bob McIntyre is really interesting to me. You know, he hasn't had some really great metrics on the PGA Tour this season, but he's another guy who's played better golf in bigger moments, and he's also left-handed, which could help him out a little bit. I think there's some value there. He's pretty far down the board. And the other guy who you mentioned earlier hasn't flashed big in majors. He's only got, I think, 1 win on the PGA Tour, but I'm seeing Maverick McNeely at 150 to 1. I don't necessarily think he's going to win, but I think that anybody who can putt that well, once they get the opportunity at Augusta National, they can make a bunch of birdies.
Like all those names, Akshay at 65 to 1. Bobby McIntyre 55 to 1, and McIntyre has a good record at the Masters, I believe, right? So a couple, at least one top 10 finish. Pretty
I
sure.
don't have that in front of me. You guys
it's
have
okay.
That.
I believe it to be the case. Let's keep going. Let's talk about some other names that you might think that is worth a little bit of a inspection and maybe an investment.
We haven't talked yet about Shane Lowry, top 25 in 4 of his last 5 Masters starts. He's having a great year with his approach play this year in the top 10 strokes gained approach. I always talk about how important that is on this golf course. It's important everywhere, but it's even more important at Augusta National. We know about how excellent his short game is. He's had some really great finishes, good low rounds here. Don't hear him talk about a lot. He plays great in Florida every year leading into the Masters, plays really well on difficult golf courses. We get a little, you said it's going to be a little cool, get a little wind. I like the big man to put together some good, make plenty of birdies out there at Augusta National this week.
Gentlemen, always a pleasure. We have kicked this thing off beautifully. We'll be tracking you. You can catch us here on Fairway Rollin and on the Bill Simmons podcast throughout the week. Nathan and I are jumping on airplanes to get ourselves down to Augusta National for the week. Assuming we do not get escorted off the grounds against our will, we should have some nice observations for you Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we're going to do a little bit of after the Thursday round recap, hopefully talking about all the money we've made for you and ourselves on first round leader. It's a great week to be playing golf, so please, if you're able to play and just get yourselves ready for this Masters, let's hit them straight up there.